Hey y'all, welcome back to So Crafty. Today I wanted to show y'all how to make a cat carrier cover, and this video is being made for Every Stitch Matters and the San Francisco SPCA. So this is what it looks like, and it has a slit on the top where the handle will be, and it's also reversible. So you got one side different than the other. And I don't have one of those cat carriers, so I'm using a little crate here just to kind of show an example of it. But I'm going to give you the measurements, and we're going to go through how to make it step by step. It's really easy and it's fun to do. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more crafting tutorials. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Now, making these, you want to use cotton fabric, and I have gone ahead and cut my pieces out, and these are the sizes that you need. I've made a kind of a template, and so this kind of helps, you know, for you to make more. So this piece is for the sides, and it's 14 inches by 19 inches, and you need to cut 2 of these. And this piece is for the top, and you need a 14.5 inch by 19 inch, and you just cut 1 of those. And this piece is for the front and the back, and these are 14 inches by 14.5 inches, and you cut 1 for the front and 1 for the back. And I've got my pieces already cut out here, and I label them too, just so I don't get confused about what is what, because the measurements are pretty close. And I'll put that down in the description of the video, so you'll have that. And I'll also put the instructions as far as what to sew first. Okay, now I've got 2 different fabrics. So I've got this pinkish butterfly here, and then I've got this bird looking fabric. And so this is going to be the reversible kind. And that's all you need. You just need fabric. You don't need any kind of batting. You don't need any kind of interfacing. It works well with just the fabric. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the front and the back aside. That's going to go last. Now you're going to take your top piece and 2 of your sides of the same fabrics. So I'm going to take this piece and then these 2 pieces, which are the sides, and we're going to sew them to the top. And so what you want to do is take the long side of each piece, and you're going to pin it to the top part like this, and you're just going to sew a straight seam all the way down. All right, so I've got one side pinned to the top to sew. Now I'm going to pin the other side to the top to sew, and you're only going to use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so all you're going to do is just sew 1 straight stitch down on this side and 1 straight stitch down on this side, and you're going to do that using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you're going to do it on the longest sides. So let's go ahead and go to the sewing machine and do that now. I got my top and sides here ready to sew up. We're going to sew along the long side, and we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've got my sides sewn to the top, just like that. And now we're going to sew the front and the back. And so you're going to get one of your pieces that you have marked for the front and the back. And you need to make sure that you're going to sew the right length to the right length. Now, it's 14 inches tall, and the front and the back is 14.5 inches by 14 inches tall. So you want to make sure that you have the 14-inch tall side matching up with the 14-inch tall side that you just sewn. So you can measure it up like this. So as you can tell, this one is a little bit longer than the seam. So I know that's the wrong side. So I'm going to flip it and I'm going to measure it up, match it up, and then you're going to include the seam that you just sewed. And so this is the 14-inch side. And then, you know, obviously if you have a ruler, you can just measure it and then just make sure that you put the 14-inch side together with the 14-inch side that you just sewn together. And what's going to happen is if it's just going to make it a little bit shorter, like 1/2 inch, if you don't match them up the same. Okay, so I've got them all matched up. Now, you want to do all this with right sides together. And so I've got one side, and I'm going to sew it to the side that I just sewn to the top, okay? Using my front or back piece, whatever the case may be. Now, the first thing I want to do to hold it in place, I'm going to sew the bottom first. I'm just going to sew one stitch for about midway down from the bottom, so it stays in place and it doesn't move around. And we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance to do that. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I've got this side sewn up so it won't move around as I sew the other pieces. And there's other ways that you can do it, I'm sure, but this one I just found was easier for me to do. So now I'm going to go to the opposite side that I just sewed, and I'm going to start from the end, and I'm going to sew all the way up and all the way around and connect to the other side that I just sewed. So let's go ahead and do that. Using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, right sides together. Now, if you feel like, if you want to pin it, you can do that so it doesn't shift, but I'm not pinning right now. Just make sure your sides or your edges are matched up. Now, when you get to the seam that you sewed to the top, you're going to put your needle in that part and you're going to pivot. So let me show you. Let me see if I can move the camera a little closer so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the seam right here that I sewed the side to the top. And so I'm going to sew until my needle gets in that seam, and it's not going to be all the way to the end. Let me see if I can do this and hold it at the same time. Okay, now if you can tell, my needle is in the seam there. I don't know if you could see that or not. But now I'm going to take it and I'm going to turn the whole pieces of fabric around and just pivot it around. And I'll show you. Let me put this down so I can do it. Okay. I'm going to line up the edges of the top like this. And then I've just pivoted the whole thing around. And I'm lining up the tops, and then I'm just going to sew over that. And then I'm going to do the same thing all the way to the end. So I stopped, and again, I've got my needle in the seam of the side that I tied the top to. Excuse me. And so now I'm going to stop, lift up my presser foot, turn the whole thing around, line up the sides here. And then I'm going to sew all the way down until I connect to where I sewed the first stitch, the side to the other. All right, and that's it. So I've got both of my corners sewn up like this. And so when you flip it, it's going to have a nice little corner that's going to go over the crate. And so, see if you can kind of see it taking shape, kind of look like that. I'll lay it over my sewing machine, like that. So here's the corners. Okay, now we want to do the other side the exact same way, right sides together. I'm matching up my 14-inch side to one side, and then this is either the front or the back, right sides together. And then I'm going to sew halfway from the middle down, just to kind of keep it together. And then I'm going to go to the opposite side that I just sewed and match it up, match your edges up. And I'm going to start from the bottom and go all the way around using a 1/2-inch seam allowance. And then you're going to stop at the seam from the side and the top that you sewed very beginning. And you will have a little piece of fabric left over, so you're not sewing all the way to the end on this one. And that's how you're going to make the corner. Okay, so I have stopped in the seam, and now I'm just going to raise my presser foot, and I'm going to pivot around the whole thing to where I'm going to be sewing down the other side. And then I'm going to match up my edges. Now we're going to go ahead and sew down that side. Same thing, I'm in the seam where I sewed the top to the side at the very beginning. And now I'm going to match these edges up, and then I'm going to sew all the way down to the stitch that I made when I first started sewing the back or the front to the side. Okay. All right, and that's it. So you have kind of like this little cover here, and then when you flip it, it's going to go over like that. And I'll show you on my little sample. I'll show you on the crate what it looks like. I just got through sewing one piece, so now I'm going to kind of show you what it's going to look like, so it's a little easier to see the shape. I'm just going to set it over like that. Okay, and then you poke these corners out. And so this is how it's going to end up. And we'll poke the corners out a little bit more when we get through. So it's on the crate like this. Now we're going to do the same thing to our other pieces. Okay, so we're going to take the sides. We've got one top here, and we're going to take the sides and sew these to the top. Now, this is directional fabric, so when you have directional fabric, you want to make sure that it's going to go the right way, that it's not upside down, in other words. So in order for me to be able to put this to where it's going to be right sides up, then when you pin it, you're going to pin right sides together. And then what I would do is, just to make sure you've got it going the right way, I'm just going to pin this like this, and then folding it over. You want it to hang with the right sides facing up. So I have this the right way. So I've got that, and now we're going to go ahead and pin this one on the other side to the top. And I'm gonna, when you fold it down, I've got it going the right way. So these are gonna hang down the right way. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and sew 1/2 inch seam allowance down each side, just like I did before. And feel free to rewind to when I did this one to help you if you need to see it again. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and do that now. I've got my side seams all sewn up, my sides sewn to the top. Now, this is going to be the front, because it's actually not going to matter because they can turn it around however they want. And so, but again, you do want your directional fabric to be going the right way. So now we're going to sew the front and the back on like we did for this piece. So this is going to be the front and then the back part here. And the way we're going to do that is, again, we have directional fabric, so we need to make sure that we're going to be sewing the right way. So I'm going to lay open my top and my sides here, and I'm going to just lay my fabric, my front, on just to see if maybe once I sew it, the seam is going to be here. I'm going to fold it down. So yes, the directional is going the right way. So this is how you want to lay it, right sides together. Now we also, this is where we need to sew the side first. So this is matching up with my 14 inches on this side. That's another thing with the directional fabric. You want to make sure your top is the 14.5 inch, because that's what the top is. The top is 14.5 inches wide. So this happens to match up. And so then we're just going to go and I'm going to start on one side, sew it up about halfway, and then I'm going to add it to this side, and then start here at the bottom and then go ahead and go all the way up, stop at the seam, raise my presser foot, pivot, turn it, sew down this side, stop at the seam, pivot, turn it, line up the edges, and then sew all the way down to where I started. And so we're going to do this for both pieces. And again, you can feel free to rewind the video to where I did that with this fabric. It's the exact same way. So I'll do that for mine, and then I'll meet y'all back here. Okay, I just got through making my other one. And so I'll put it over so you can get an idea like that. Okay. Now we want to sew both of them together. So the way you're going to do that is you need to put them right sides together. So that means turning one inside out and having the other one right side out. And then you're just going to slip it inside the one that's wrong side out. So the right side out goes inside the one that's wrong side out. If that makes sense. And then what you're going to do next is match up your seams, your side seams. And then I'm just going to pin here just to kind of keep it together. Since it's kind of big, it can kind of get mixed up or shift or what have you. And so we're going to match up the seams on this end. Matching up both of my seams like this. And then I'm going to put a pin in the middle. Okay. And then you want to also match up your raw edges. And so I'm going to, I got my seams matched up, I got my raw edges matched up, and now I'm going to go ahead and put a pin here on one of the sides. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Got my seams matched up, and the raw edges. And now we're just going to sew all the way around these raw edges using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're going to leave about a 3-inch gap so we can turn it later. So let's go to the sewing machine and we'll do that now. I'm going to start on one of the long sides, and I'm going to start a little bit about 3 inches from the middle, and then I'm just going to sew all the way around, 1/2 inch seam allowance, keeping my raw edges together. Okay, I'm back to where I started, and so I'm going to come down to about 3 inches or so before I first started stitching. And then I'm going to back stitch there. And now you want to take all your pins out, if you have any. And then you want to turn it. Go ahead and turn it right sides out. Okay, now once you get it right sides out, you're going to put one inside the other. Doesn't really matter which since it's reversible. So I'm just going to stuff this inside, and then I'm going to match up my corners, and I'm going to kind of like poke them out like this, so they're all nice and shaped. Okay, then I'm going to do that the other side. And then you're going to do that for the other corners on the other side as well. Okay. Now we want to take it to the ironing board and iron the bottom. I'm going to put it on the smaller side of my ironing board. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fold it down to where the edges, that seam is kind of tucked out. And it's nice and flat. Now, if you need help doing that, you can get a stick or a pin or whatever, and then just kind of push out that seam on the end and make sure it's just pushed out nice and flat. And then I'm just going to iron it down. Then I'm going to move it over and then do the same thing. Going to pull that seam down. And then I'm going to fold in my opening. I'm going to iron it closed, matching up the edges. And I'm going to get a pin to pin it so it stays closed. All right, and then we're just going to do that all the way around. Just keep ironing. Okay, now that we've got it all ironed up, flat in the bottom, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and top stitch all the way around, and that'll help us top stitch this opening closed. I'm going to start where the opening is so I'll remember to close it. And I'm going to use about 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to go all the way, top stitch all the way around the bottom of the cover. stitch where I started. Close it up, cut my loose threads, and then you've got the top stitch done at the bottom. Okay, we are almost done. Now what I want to do is, just to make sure that it doesn't shift, the whole pieces shift, I want to sew a seam around the tops. Just a little seam, it doesn't have to be, or sew a stitch around the tops. It doesn't have to be a big one, just to kind of stitch it in place so it doesn't move around. So I'm going to just kind of match up my corners here. Here's my corner for the inside and the one on top. There's my corner there. I'm just going to kind of lay, I've got it upside down, so I'm going to lay the top piece on my mat here. And I'm just kind of matching up the corners and straightening out the top. So if you can tell, my top is on the bottom and it's all flat and straight. So now I want to pin all four sides. So I'm going to come down a little bit because I'm going to stitch right by the seam. And so I'm just going to kind of pin these in place so they don't shift. Do this side, and then do this side. I'm just pinning it to hold it in place, and I'm pinning it about 2-3 inches down from the seam because we're going to sew right by the seam. Okay, so now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to stitch a small stitch by each pin just to kind of tack it and hold it in place so it doesn't shift around as it's being moved. So let's go ahead and do that. So you can see where my pin is. So I'm just going to put the whole thing under my presser foot. Make sure it's all nice and smooth and straightened out. And I'm just going to sew a little bit above it, just a small little stitch back and forth. You're going to start back stitch, go about 2 inches, stop, and back stitch. Just like that. That's really all you need, just to kind of tack it in place, and you're going to do that on all four sides. So here's where my pin is on this side. I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, here's the pin on this side. I'm going to start back stitch, sew 2 or 3 inches, and then back stitch and stop. For that, I'm gonna remove my pins and clip my loose threads, and then you can see on the other side that you've just sewn a stitch all the way around just to kind of tack it in place. Now you're ready to create the handle. So initially, after all said and done, after you sew it up and everything, it should measure 13 inches tall by 13.5 inches wide and 18 inches long. And so what we want to do is find the right placement for our handle. Our handle, we're going to cut our handle out 8 inches long. I'm sorry, cut the handle out 8 inches long, 2 inches wide, and it's going to be an inch and a half from one of the top seams. And so to mark it, you can use one of these water soluble pencils. You could use, there's other pencils that you can use that will wash off or wipe off of the fabric as well. And so I'm using one of these water solubles that when you get it wet, or if you can just wet it and it'll mark off, but you don't need a big mark. So I'm going to just measure corner to corner. make sure I've got the right measurements. Okay, yep, I am very, very close. So I'm going to put this, I have it, the top on the bottom, laid on my mat again, and I'm going to find the corner or the side seams on the inside, whichever is easiest. And then I'm just going to mark a middle. So mine shows a little over 13 inches, which is okay. If it's a little bit over, that's fine. So I'm going to find half of that, which is 6 1/2, and so I'm going to move it over maybe 6 1/4. So I'm just going to put a little mark right there, showing that's where I want to put my handle. Now we want to put the handle, start cutting 1 1/2 inches from the top seam. So here's my top seam, here's where my handle is going to be cut, here's 1 1/2 inches, and I'm exactly 1 1/2 inches. That never happens. By the way, it just happened to do that now. Okay, now we're going to cut an 8-inch long handle. So I'm just going to put my ruler on the top of that mark that I made. And I'm going to go down 8 inches, and then I'm going to cut, or I'm going to make another little mark. Okay, so that's where that is. And then we want it to be 2 inches wide. So I'm going to put the marks that I made. I'm going to put the 1 inch on top of it, and then I'm just going to go 2 inches over here, or 1 inch over there and 1 inch over there, so that way the whole thing equals 2 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. So we just want to cut a slit 2 inches wide. Okay, so there's that. Now you can go ahead and cut it. So I'm just going to put my marker here on the 2 lines that I made, and I'm going to start at where I made the line to do the width, and then I'm just going to go all the way down to that 1 line. So that's my 8-inch slit to the handle, and then I'm going to start on where I made the 2 inches wide slits, and I'm just going to cut those open like this. And that's it. So now I'm going to trim this up and make sure it opens all the way. Okay, that's good. Now we're going to fold these over on the inside. The edges that you just made, or the cuts that you just made, the pieces of fabric, we're just going to fold those inside each other to where we don't have raw edges. And we're going to stitch those up, and then what we're going to do for these raw edges is we're going to make a zigzag stitch. So I'm just folding these edges in like this. And then making sure they match up. To where we don't have any raw edges. And then I'm going to pin those in place. Now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and sew those up. Now we're just going to top stitch the 2 edges that we folded over, so there's no, for the handle, so that there's no raw edges. And I'm going to remove this pin, and then you're going to do about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and you're going to start back stitch, go all the way down to the end, and then back stitch, and then stop. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Start, back stitch, 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and go all the way to the end and back stitch. now we want to zigzag stitch the two tops, the shortest parts. We're just going to zigzag stitch that so it doesn't, it covers the raw edges. So I'm going to change my machine to a zigzag stitch, and I'm going to make the width of it at 3.9, so it's not so big. And then we're just going to zigzag stitch all the way to the edge. If you want to do it a couple of times just to cover it, make sure it's well covered, then that'll be good. Now we're going to do this side. Okay, now I'm going to cut my loose threads. All the way around. Here it is on my little pink crate. And there's the sides and the front, back, whichever the case may be. And here's the handle hole. And then if you notice, all my fabrics, the birds are going the right way. So that's what we wanted. And then, so you can say that this is the front with the handle. And then you can also turn it and have this side like this. And you just poke out the corners a little more. And you have a reversible cat carrier cover. And there's the sides. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment or send me an email at flemingconnieg@gmail.com. And again, this video was for Every Stitch Matters and San Francisco SPCA. So they would really appreciate your help, and they could really use these cat covers. And I'm sure there are some other rescues as well that could use these too. So thanks again for watching. Please subscribe and hit the like button if you enjoyed it, and I hope y'all have a great day. Thank you again. See you next time. Bye-bye.